What is up, my dudes, and welcome back to another video. I told you you'd be back, didn't I say? I said you'd be back. If you're new, please do consider subscribing. I need all the help I can get right now. welcome. As the video title suggests, this is going to be a tutorial on how to make an animated GIF from a video clip. Now, hopefully you've already got that video clip trimmed down, but if you haven't, I'm going to cover all bases and I'll show you how to do that. So you may need a couple of things. You're going to need some sort of trimming program, and you may potentially need a compression program, depending on whether Photoshop lets you open the file. She can be touchy. So we'll cover all bases, don't worry. The first thing I'm going to want to do is trim my file down. So in order to do that, and what I mean by trim the file down is trim my video clip down to a GIF size file, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is trim that down. I'm going to use a program, and I think I got this right, called Avid Mux. Sorry if I butchered that, but it's essentially a really cool trimming tool. It means that I don't have to take my video into Sony Vegas Pro or After Effects to trim it down, because that does all sorts of encoding and horrible compression. So I'm going to use this program here, and it is really useful. So I'm going to head over to my video, which in this case is just sort of some CSGO gameplay that I got. So the GIF itself is going to be, sorry about that, the GIF itself is going to be terrible, but hopefully you'll get the idea for what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to drag that into my Avid Mux program and just select the start and end points on which I want my GIF to start and end. So in this case, I think there's like a kind of really poor no scope that I in here that I'm going to use, and I think it starts here. So I'm going to scroll to where I want my GIF to start, hit this little start marker here, scroll to where I want it to end, and then hit the little end marker, and that's it. I can then just hit save on this video, choose where I want to output that file to, so in this case my desktop, and it's going to go ahead and make that file for me. So if I boot that up now, this is the trimmed clip of what I essentially want to turn into a GIF. Now, Photoshop can be touchy, so if I go to File and Import to try and import this clip, there's an option called Video Frames to Layers, which is what we're going to be using today. And I can try and import my clip, but I get the feeling it's going to throw a fuss up, and it has. Now, that's often due to the encoding or the video file itself. So what I'm going to want to do is recompress that and reformat it. So I'm going to use a program called Handbrake to do that. So I'm going to boot into, and I'll link both of these programs in the description, don't worry. But I'm going to boot into Handbrake and bring my GIF clip into here, and just stick with some sort of basic preset like fast 1080p, but you may want to change your frame rate to same as source, and potentially put your RF to something of a lower value. That will give it a better quality, and hopefully you won't get too much lossless quality in there, or you won't get too much loss of quality in there, sorry. And then I'm just going to want to choose where I want to output this to. So again, I'm going to output it to my desktop and just call this test, and then hit save and encode, and that shouldn't take too long at all. When that's done, I can then move my encoded file into Photoshop successfully, hopefully, we'll see. Import video frames to layers and my test file. Brilliant. So it's going to let me import that now. So because we've already trimmed this, we want to leave our selection as from beginning to end. You can trim this further in Photoshop if you want to, but I really wouldn't bother. Photoshop is a terrible tool for trimming clips. It's not made for that, that's why. So we've done all that outside. So I'm just going to hit OK to import that in. The first thing I'm going to want to do is be able to view each frame. So in order to do that, I'm going to go Window and Timeline, and that's going to give me a timeline of all the potential frames within this GIF. Now, depending on what you want to do with this GIF, some of you may be just saving it to your desktop so you can view it from time to time. Great, in that case you don't have to worry about file size. But for those of you that are making this for an Instagram post or for a Twitter post or something, you may have certain file sizes that you need to adhere to. So I'm going to go over how to sort of trim the file size down a little bit on this, to give you an idea. It may just be that the clip's too big in some cases, but I am going to cover some things onto sort of how to reduce the file size so that you can output it to certain social medias or whatever. So the first thing you may sort of consider doing to reduce the file size is reducing the image size itself. So in order to do that, if you head up to image and then image size, it'll give you what the dimensions are. So this is currently an 1152 by 720p, which is way too big for a GIF. So I'm going to reduce that to half, which is then sort of 570 by 360, and hit OK. And that in turn is going to sort of half the size of this file. And what I could also potentially do, depending on what my GIF is trim the canvas itself, right? So this is a gaming clip, so I don't necessarily want to do that because I don't want to trim the map or the feed off, but I'll show you what I mean anyway. So if I head to image and then canvas size, I could trim the width down to, let's say, 7, and the height down to 4, and then that's going to trim the overall canvas, but it tends to crop the sides. So that only really applies to certain GIFs. So I'm going to Control or Command Z to undo that in this case. And another thing you can do to reduce the file size is to sort of delete every other frame, right? So if I hold Control or Command on my keyboard, I can select frame 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on and so forth. And then eventually when I get to the end, I can just delete all those frames by hitting this little delete icon down the bottom. And again, that will halve the size of your file. It is worth mentioning though, every single time you do that, the GIF itself is going to get a lot more clunky and less smooth, because you're losing frames essentially. So you may want to, if it gets to a point where your file size is still too big, you may want to consider using a shorter clip, for example. Now, how do we check the file size? So that can be found in the export. So when you actually go to save the GIF, it will tell you what the size of it is. So if I go to File, Export, and then save for web, using the legacy version, it's going to give me my file size down here just underneath. So in this case 8 meg. You can sort of get a gauge as to how big the file is going to be there and go back into the editing screen, so sort of start to delete those frames if you want. Or you could potentially reduce the file size within the actual settings themselves. So you'll notice at the moment we've got the image size here. I could reduce that smaller if I wanted to, like we did previously, or I can also reduce the percentage, so the quality. I could take this down to 80%, for example, and that's going to resize it. And I can also reduce my colors. So at the moment I've got 256. If I reduce that down to 128, it's going to take some of the colors out, but it's also going to lower the file size. So that's another way to sort of keep on top of how big the file is going to be. Now what you may also want to do is slow the whole GIF down. So for instance, if I hit preview here, you'll notice this GIF plays through fairly quick. You don't really get a chance to see what's going on. So in order to do that, I'm going to cancel out of my saving screen, scroll to the very end of my timeline, just hit these 4 bars here and hit select all frames. And then from there, I can just drop down on the final one and change how quick it displays each frame. So in this case, it's displaying each frame 0.03 of a second. I'm going to hit other and change that out to 0.05. Hit OK, and you'll notice that changes every single frame down the bottom there. And then I'm going to go and review my file. So I'm going to hit File, Export again, and save for Web Legacy, and then Preview. And you'll notice that's slowing the GIF down quite a bit. So that's how to speed up or slow down the GIF itself. But other than that, and without getting into the sort of ins and outs of how to edit each individual frame, which we will do in another video. This was how to make a GIF. We'll talk about how to edit them in another video, but without getting into too much detail, that's how you make a very basic GIF if you've already got the clip. So hopefully that's helped. Hopefully that's covered a lot of bases, and any questions or anything you want me to address in the next video where we talk about editing this, please do drop it into the comments. Otherwise, enjoy your lockdown, my dudes, and I'll speak to you soon.